And we are live on YouTube.
Well, good morning. And thank you for joining us for our regular scheduled Board of Trustees meeting. First one ever held remotely in 227 years. I'm Richard Stevens, currently chair of the board. We welcome all of you who are with us or watching our meeting. We really want to thank our IT staff and our communications staff for the logistics to make this meeting happen today. Just a couple of other logistics for you. If you would, if you're not speaking, please mute your microphone. It'll help us all until you do speak. And then if you would, because we have others watching us, and we don't have name tags that they can see, please identify yourself. And if you're making a motion or a second so that TJ and Clayton can get the record correct for the minutes, please identify yourself. So with that, let me call the meeting officially to order and call on Secretary Teresa Artis-Neal to call the roll.
Okay. Ms. Artis-Neal is present. Mr. Bullock.
Present.
Mr. Brown.
Present.
Mr. Kobe.
Present.
Mr. Cochran.
Present.
Mr. Davis.
Present.
Mr. Deckett.
Here.
Mrs. Hopkins.
Present.
Ms. Martin.
Present.
Mr. McCullen.
Present.
Mr. Meekins.
Present.
Mr. Pryor.
Present.
Mr. Stevens.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. As chair of the Board of Trustees, it's my responsibility to remind all members of the board of their duty under the State Government Ethics Act to avoid conflicts of interest and appearances of conflicts of interest as required by this act. Each member has received the agenda and related information for this Board of Trustees meeting. If any member knows of any conflict of interest or appearance of conflict of interest with respect to any matter coming before the board at this meeting, the conflict or appearance of conflict should be identified at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a conflict with regard to the lease amendment regarding Cousins and Northwood Raven. So I will
That was
be,
Trustee Brown. So noted. And I do have a conflict under the item of parking deck and lot camera upgrades. I won't be participating or voting on that item. Are there any others? Next item for us is our consent agenda. Having read the materials listed under the consent agenda, is there any item that needs to be moved to the discussion portion of either the open or closed session? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of January 29th, 30th of 2020 and the ratification of the mail ballots dated February 26th of 2020.
This is Gene Davis.
So moved.
A motion by Gene Davis or a second?
Second.
Second by Haywood, is that correct?
Yes.
Further discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Ladies and gentlemen, we are truly in unprecedented times. The coronavirus threatens the health, the safety, and the well-being of our entire community. Each of us has felt its impact. In response, Carolina has reduced campus operations, has moved to remote instruction, and has limited people on campus to just mandatory personnel. But the important work of this university continues. We're following the direction from President Roper and the university system. We're grateful for their leadership and support. Chancellor, your leadership has been vital. Even with a constantly changing situation, you've made decisions decisively and effectively and in a timely manner. You've made listening to our campus a priority. For example, your efforts just this week to listen to our graduating seniors about what they want for commencement is commendable. You and your entire leadership team have responded to this challenge and have proven you're up to the task. I know I speak for the entire board in saying thank you all for your hard work and dedication. This unprecedented moment in our nation's history has meant significant sacrifice for our students, staff, faculty, and others. And as always, the Board of Trustees is amazed by the strength and resilience of our community. Our doctors, nurses, healthcare workers, and researchers are on the front lines every day fighting this disease. our faculty have found innovative ways to continue teaching and training the next generation of leaders. Our students are adapting to remote instruction and continuing to learn in the midst of this difficult time. Our dedicated staff is working under very unusual and often challenging circumstances. But Carolina is strong, and we will get through this together. Our mission of teaching, research, and service remains at the front of our minds, despite the challenges of a global pandemic. As a board, we have no doubt that this university's excellence will continue. One example of that excellence is our graduate program's recent rankings with the new U.S. News and World Report's Best Graduate Schools list. The Ashton School of Pharmacy received the #1 ranking, along with the School of Medicine's Primary Care Program. Our School of Nursing's Master's Degree Program was ranked #3. The School of Law jumped 7 places to 27th in the country overall, up 18 places since just 2 years ago. We're now in the top 10 of all public law schools in the country. At the School of Government, our Master of Public Administration Local Government Management Program is ranked #2 in the country. Many of those graduates are out on the front lines every day during this crisis. Congratulations to all of our graduate programs for the hard work and dedication to excellence reflected in these rankings. The work of this university continues, and during today's meeting, we will hear from Professors Jim Lalutis and Pat Parker from the History, Race, and the Way Forward Commission. This commission has our board's support to do its work freely and without any restraint, and we look forward to considering all their recommendations and ideas. We thank in advance Chair Lalutis and Parker and the commission for continuing their critical work in the midst of this challenging time. I want to close with a thank you to our board members for your flexibility during this time. Again, to Chancellor Guskowicz and his entire leadership team for their hard work, and our campus community and beyond for your many, many sacrifices. Finally, we want to say thank you to our student body president, Ashton Martin, for her service to our university. Ashton, you've been faithful in representing our students and campus well.
Thank you.
Now I ask Trustee Teresa Artis-Neal to read a resolution.
Resolution of Appreciation, Ashton Martin, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Board of Trustees, from March 26 today, 2020. Whereas Ashton Martin served as president of the university student body during the 2019 to 2020 academic year and spoke ardently and frankly on behalf of all her fellow students as a valued member of the university's Board of Trustees. And whereas Ms. Martin devotedly focused on representing students across our university by identifying, uplifting, and supporting the voices of all Carolina students. And whereas Ms. Martin's personal commitment to increase diversity and advocacy for smaller communities and organizations helped advance a Carolina culture where everyone believes this can be their home. And whereas Ms. Martin will be remembered as a student leader who listened and made changes in a positive way, ensuring student government under her leadership was a platform for students to trust, to empower, and uplift their voice. And whereas a sign of her dedication as student body president, Ms. Martin has demonstrated an amazing record of selfless service and made significant contributions during her time at Carolina, serving as the co-chair of the Affairs Committee and Undergraduate Student Government, serving on the Thrive at Carolina Advisory Board, and working as an executive assistant to the vice president of the student body. Whereas Ms. Martin helped make us the Carolina we are today through her contributions as a member of the Chancellor Search Committee and the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs Search Committee, and dedication as co-chair of the Tuition and Fee Advisory Task Force. And whereas Ms. Martin's greatest leadership challenge faced by any recent president of the university's student body by assisting university leadership as it worked tirelessly to continue Carolina's mission of teaching, research, and service in new ways as the community faced a new world brought on by the novel coronavirus. And whereas Ms. Martin, during her service as a trustee, provided valuable counsel and input to the board, and always did so while displaying grace, compassion, and wit. And from her first meeting, made it readily apparent why her fellow students elected her as president of the student body. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill thanks and congratulates Ashton Martin for her outstanding service as student body president and as a trustee, and wishes her all the best as a soon-to-be Tar Heel alumna.
You've heard the resolution. Teresa makes a motion that it be adopted. Is there a second?
Gene Davis,
Second.
I second.
Gene Davis seconds. Now you want to turn on your microphone, folks. Members of the board. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Unanimous, of course. Ashton, we wish we could present this to you in person. Give you a full round of applause by everybody. We'll try here. But no, we're very, very grateful for your efforts and leadership of all the students this past year. And we wish you the very, very best in your future endeavors. We'll find a way when this time has passed to have you back to one of our meetings and be a little bit more formal in presenting this resolution and recognizing your work. But we do thank you for all you've done. And now we want to turn it over to you for your remarks.
Thank you. Made me cry a little bit. Thank you all for your kind words. Since it is my last meeting, I hope you'll forgive me for just using this time to say thank you. First, I wanted to say how truly honored I am to have worked with all of you over the past year. To my fellow trustees, I've learned more from each and every one of you than I could have ever hoped or dreamed. Several of you transitioned onto the board the same time as I did, and many of you have served longer than I'd been at this university. But none of you had to welcome me, talk to me, and listen to me like a peer. And I'm eternally grateful for the support that each and every one of you has given me. And to Kevin specifically, thank you for listening and being an advocate for students. My worst fear taking the job was not having a chancellor that would listen, but you proved time and time again that you could always make time to hear my concerns, and you always treated my opinion as valid. So thank you for that. This is not how I expected my year as SVP to end. Truly, I thought the worst thing that would happen would be something to do with Silent Sam. But I am proud that my last real act was to declare a state of emergency, freeing up some money to be given to the Student Impact Fund that the university wisely started for relief efforts. And I am so proud of so many things that my administration did over the past year that I found it impossible to list just a few. I just wanted to publicly thank my team, my entire team, every 224 of them, for their tireless work to make our crazy dreams for this university come true over the past year. I just wish I could have given them a better end. So thank you all for working with me, listening, and always making these meetings more fun than they honestly ever should be. I will honestly miss it, and thank you all.
Thank you, Ashton. Now let me call on the Chancellor. He's been a busy man the last few weeks. Your audio's not on yet. No, not yet.
One second here. Is that
Okay,
better?
yes, we got you now.
There we go.
You're on.
Okay. Well, I want to also, Ashton, just thank you. You've been an incredible leader on our campus. I felt as if it's been a real partnership with you, and we are here for you, during these last 6-8 weeks of your Carolina career, but we're going to be here for you beyond that, and you are always welcome home, and thank you for all that you've done. But good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Richard, for your encouragement, and I want to echo your thanks to our South Building team for making this virtual meeting possible. We're in the midst of, as you've already said, an unprecedented moment in our university's history. The coronavirus's impact cannot be overstated. Every member of our community has felt the effects. But as I've said repeatedly over the past few weeks, it's during these extraordinary times that we've witnessed extraordinary people rising up to help others. We've had to make agonizing decisions with no easy answers, knowing the disappointment, stress, and uncertainty felt by our students, our faculty, and our staff. In addition to health concerns related to the pandemic, I am concerned about the financial implications to our university and to our students and their families. Our leadership team is working in close collaboration with NC State university leaders, the UNC system, and the Board of Governors to advocate for assistance from the North Carolina General Assembly during this critical time. We will need assistance from the state to help us recover from this unprecedented health crisis, and I remain optimistic that our legislators will recognize this need as we bear the responsibility of preparing the next generation of leaders here in North Carolina and across our nation. But today, I want to focus on what is within our immediate control and show how we have responded as a campus. 97% of our courses have moved to remote instruction. And this is a transition that occurred over just about a 10-day period and started this past Monday. So I just want to thank our incredible faculty for their flexibility, innovation, and dedication to our students. One great example came from a student in a class taught by our award-winning law professor, John Orth. Professor Orth, admittedly a bit nervous, addressed his first video lecture to the only person in the empty classroom, and that being a Pinocchio doll that he set in the front row because he was unaccustomed to teaching to an empty classroom. And you may have seen this, it went viral. The student's complimentary tweet received over 1.2 million likes. That's just one example. And if we had time, I could share another dozen fun stories like this about our world-class faculty rising to the occasion. Most of these stories shared with me over the past few days by our students. For each decision and update that we've had to make over the past few weeks, and I just want to thank our incredible leadership team, not just here in the South Building, but out around our campus. They've been incredible. We've always had the health, safety, and well-being of our community at the top of our minds, with the students' educational experience a close second. And I will just say that after 3 days of remote instruction, it's going extremely well. And I've heard from many students that they're grateful for what we've been able to do in quick order. Unfortunately, we have postponed spring commencement, as Chair Stevens mentioned, and we've received now almost 4,000 responses from our soon-to-be graduates to a survey that I sent out last Friday to hear from them, asking them how they would like to mark this moment in their lives. Just before making that difficult announcement last Friday, I spoke with commencement speaker Frank Bruni. He said he too was disappointed, but certainly understands and plans to do something special for the graduates in May, although it is unlikely that we'll be able to host commencement on our campus, probably August being the earliest that we could potentially do that. But we're considering a number of options, and we will certainly come back to the board with a proposed plan. I told a group of seniors just this week remotely, I met with my student advisory committee, that I would climb the bell tower with them in due time to celebrate their accomplishments, to fulfill their Tar Heel graduation week tradition. We are going to keep those traditions alive, even if it has to be in August, October, or December. I also want to thank our Emergency Operations Center, the communicable disease coordinating groups, and the COVID-19 executive ops team for their tireless work over these past 3 or 4 weeks. They have helped move us forward. In this difficult time when we don't know what the next day will bring, I'm so proud to say that the work of our great university has continued. Working alongside the leadership team, we've continued meeting and planning for the future. Just in the past 10 days, we've had virtual meetings of the Faculty Council, the Chancellor's Advisory Committee, Faculty Executive Committee, and the Student Advisory Committee, and just proud that we've been able to continue this important work. The search committees continue their important work for our Vice Provost for Equity and Inclusion and the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs positions. This board meeting today is another example of our leadership continuing this university's work, and I want to thank you all for being here. The past weeks, I've been reminded of a speech by Charles Kuralt that I quoted at last year's commencement. Kuralt talked about Carolina as a conspiracy of good people, and you've heard me mention this. And I brought that speech back from his 1985 commencement address. He describes that conspiracy as people who return us to reason, compassion, and decency. And Carolina is, at its heart, its people. And I've witnessed their reason, compassion, and decency again and again these past few weeks. After we sent out the notice that students should not return to campus, the first email that I received was from a student who runs our campus food shelter. And he was worried and asking about those students and staff who rely on the food shelter about how they were going to be fed. I've gotten emails from students asking about volunteering at the hospitals just this week in an environment that, as you well know by watching the news, is a highly vulnerable environment. But this is that conspiracy of good people. Rich Superfine, Chair of Applied Physical Sciences, who leads our Be a Maker effort. Many of you have seen the makerspace. He called me on Sunday to tell me of his collaboration with North Carolina State to provide Triangle area hospitals with personal protective equipment. Along with Beam Director Kenny Langley, students and volunteers are working right now over in the Beam makerspace to make protective shields for our healthcare workers, volunteering hundreds of hours to help overcome the crisis. Dr. Melissa Miller and her team of researchers worked around the clock to roll out the COVID-19 test. And I hope you saw their work featured on the Today Show last Thursday. Our School of Education is providing resources for at-home learning to our state's teachers, students, and parents. The School of Government hosted a webinar for local government leaders across North Carolina to learn more about COVID-19 and the roles of local state emergency management officials. This is your Carolina. Call it the Carolina way, call it what you'd like, but I would argue that there's no place like it. It's an honor to be the chancellor of this conspiracy of good people, which will help get us through this national crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor. Thank you again for all you and your great team are doing. Let me now say to the board, we didn't have committees, as you noticed. Thank you for your flexibility on that. Talk to the committee chairs and make sure that they're comfortable with the items going forward. We asked the Chancellor to bring forward only those items that he thought needed action today. And so we'll have some really good presentations and other discussions at future meetings. So we've limited the meetings today to just necessary items, we think. So let's start with those, and let's start with the finance items, and let me recognize Jonathan Pruitt. Jonathan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The Committee of Finance, Infrastructure, and Audit has 3 items for your consideration and action. The first 2 are designer selections, and the last is an amendment to an existing lease. With regard to the designer selections, you all are familiar with our process and that the Board of Trustees approves a slate of 3 in priority order designers for each project. This approval simply completes our procurement process. After that, we enter into negotiations and contract with the design firm. At this point, given the uncertainty financially that we experience, we want to complete the procurement process and selection of the slate of 3, but not enter into contract negotiations until we have a better understanding of the financial situation. So with that in mind, I'll go through the 2 items for designer selection quickly and see if there are any questions. The first is a designer selection for renovation to House Undergraduate Library to allow for the Center for Student Success and Academic Counseling. The 3 firms in priority order are Vines Architecture, Lord, Egg and Sargent, and Perkins and Will. With that, I'll pause, Mr. Chairman, for questions and a motion.
Questions? Comments? If not, Haywood, we have a motion from you to adopt this item.
Yes, you do.
Is there a second?
Gene Davis, I second.
Gene seconds. Further discussion, debate. If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Now going to turn the meeting over to Vice Chair Davis to deal with the second item since I have a conflict or potential conflict.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'd like to turn it back to Jonathan Pruitt for the discussion of the parking deck and lot camera upgrades.
Thank you, Vice Chair Davis. This project is a renovation to our parking system that would move to a license plate recognition system, offering efficiencies over time. Again, this is just the selection of the designer, or slate of 3 designers, and I'll read those 3 for your reference. First, Kimley Horn. Second, Walker Consultants. And third, Dewberry. With that, I'll take any questions that the board may have and entertain a motion.
Are there any questions for the Vice Chancellor Pruitt?
This is Chuck. I have a general question. And this is going to sound a bit whiny, but you know, we've been through a lot of times where we've been doing projects and they're going into overrun, and we've paid millions and millions and millions of dollars more than we expected. As we look at these projects going forward, and obviously people are going to be looking for work, are some of these resetting in our favor? Is in price coming down, or is that just pie in the sky question? But I mean, are prudently, are we watching this and any opportunity to save, not to cut quality, but I just think it's a fair question.
Vice Chancellor Pruitt?
Absolutely, Trustee Duckett. We are watching that carefully. Typically, when the economy goes into recession, construction prices fall. We're very early in this right now, so factors that are impacting construction costs tend to be more related to supply chain issues that the economy is facing right now. But long term, we might see a reduction in construction costs, and we are monitoring that carefully.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, without objection, the chair will entertain a motion from Chairman Cochran to approve the designer selection for the parking deck and lot camera upgrades.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
And who was the second?
Oh, Kelly Hopkins.
Thank you, Trustee Hopkins. Any debate and discussion? Seeing none, we'll now move into a vote. All those in favor of approval of the parking deck and lot camera upgrade contractors or designers rather signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion stands approved. Chair Stevens.
Thank you, Vice Chair Davis. By the way, I think you need to share some of your artwork with Mr. Pruitt. He has none and you have a whole lot, it looks like. Let's now turn to the other item on the finance audit infrastructure items. Jonathan, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The final item from Finance, Infrastructure, and Audit is an amendment to an existing lease at Carolina Square. As we programmed this space, we've realized we need a little bit more space to accommodate the programming for research. And therefore, we're requesting a minor addition to the lease of 2,000 square feet. The increase in cost annually is around $60,000, but it will allow us to complete this project. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Any questions? If not, we have a motion from Haywood. Is that correct?
Yes, you do.
Is there a second?
Second, Gene Davis.
Second by Trustee Davis. Further discussion, debate? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. That completes our finance, infrastructure, and audit items. Let me now turn the meeting back over to the Chancellor for a couple of introductions.
Great, thanks, Chair Stevens. So it's now my pleasure to introduce our Provost, Bob Lewin, who's going to share with you an update on our data science initiative. But I want to first offer up a big congratulations to Bob. As you heard Chair Stevens mention at the beginning of the meeting, that the Ashton School of Pharmacy received, again, top billing as the top rated pharmacy school in the nation. And we just want to congratulate you, Bob. Thank you for your visionary leadership. If it wasn't for Bob's leadership as dean for 14 years before stepping into his provost role 2.5 years ago, I'm not sure that we would have that ranking today. So Bob, I just want to acknowledge you and thank you for your leadership of the Ashton School. A critical piece of Carolina Next, Innovations for Public Good, and our vision for the university's future is our work in data science. And I hope that this will be an opportunity for our board to hear about the progress and to learn more about our goals and to ask questions about this important initiative to create a school of data, information, and society that I believe can lead the world in using data and information to solve the grand challenges of our time. And Bob has led a steering committee alongside Dean Gary Marcinini and Jay Acat and several others. And I know Gary's with us today as well, and I'll have Bob introduce him. But Bob, I just want to thank you. You've been at the forefront of this effort alongside this incredible steering committee for the past 9 or 10 months. And so Bob's going to present about a 10-minute presentation followed by some questions and answers. so that it can help guide us forward on this endeavor. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bob.
Thank you very much, Chancellor. As all of you should have received by now, a draft copy of the proposal that the steering committee has been working on. The title of that is The Implementation of a School of Data, Information, and Society. And this is a project that started in right around May of 2019, a little bit under a year ago. And I charged a 14-member steering committee to begin the process of examining the feasibility of a data science school on the campus of UNC-Chapel Hill. Why would we do that? Well, the most important reason and justification for considering bringing data science to a whole new level of importance and significance on this campus is really driven by a number of outside factors, and mainly the changes that are taking place in the world. And those changes are driving not only our student interest and student demand for more and more academic opportunities in a rapidly growing field we now call data science, but also an explosive interest on the part of various industries that really require talent at the baccalaureate degree level, master's, and PhD graduate level, as well as new innovation and new ideas in the area of data science. And so we launched this steering committee in May. And in the process, we gave them a charge to examine the feasibility of creating a new focus on this campus in the field of data science. A focus that might lead to the creation of a new school. In doing that work, in addition to the 14-member steering committee, we enlisted additional faculty to populate 7 subcommittees. And those subcommittees were made up of well over 100 faculty and staff. The listing of the steering committee as well as the subcommittees are in the back of the proposal on page 14. And you can just begin to appreciate the scope of the effort here. It was an amazing effort on the part of our faculty, staff, and students. And I very much appreciate all of the hard work that they have done. In particular, I would like to acknowledge the chair of that committee, Dean Gary Marciani, who has just spent an incredible amount of time and effort advancing this idea and leading the effort with regards to this final proposal. And I will be asking him to outline some of that in a few minutes. In addition to the 14 pages that you've had a chance to review, behind this document is hundreds of pages that represent appendices. We have spared you the opportunity to read those appendices at this time, but I just want you to know that our subcommittees, all 7 of them, worked tirelessly to create the framework and the rationale and basis for this proposal. So the draft proposal that you have had a chance to review is there to give you a sense of where Carolina feels it needs to go in order to be competitive, not only with its peers, but also to be responsive to the rapid growing needs of the state of North Carolina. It is really the state of North Carolina that we believe that needs this program the most. And so we are very proud of the effort that has been developed to date. And what we seek from the board today is an endorsement of this proposal. Again, this was a feasibility proposal. And what we would like to move next is towards an implementation document for your review at some point in the future to ultimately support the creation and full implementation and execution of a new school centered around data science, but in terms of the way we are defining it, it goes beyond data science and includes the School of Data, Information, and Society. With that, I would like to introduce Dean Gary Marciani, who is going to go over briefly the proposal itself, the essence of the proposal, and what differentiates this proposal from our peers. We have had an opportunity to study our peers, and we focused a great deal of attention on the University of Virginia, Berkeley, Michigan, as well as a handful of other universities that have been exploring similarly to us how data science would be developed on their campuses. Some have led to the creation of a new school, others new institutes and centers, others the expansion of existing programs and departments. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Dean Gary Marciani.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you, trustees, for a chance to give you a little bit of an overview of our vision. This, as Provost Bluen has said, has been a campus-wide initiative, and we started with the premise that we wanted to imagine a school that really would be unique to the Carolina talent, culture, and as Chancellor Gustowitz has said, the Carolina way. And that includes a very interdisciplinary approach that is pan-campus, that builds upon strength across the entire campus, but that also has a core that addresses this emerging new field. And this field is new. And what we believe is that we can't just address some of the components alone, but we really have to take a full life cycle point of view. Where does data come from? How do we assure that it's accurate? How do we manage it? How do we then analyze it with new kinds of techniques and algorithms? And then how do we visualize, interpret, and understand it for decision making, preserve it for reuse? And this has to include not just people who are doing sort of the technical things, managing the computational processes, but the legal, ethical issues that arise when we deal with data. We can take the current coronavirus crisis as a good example of how much we depend upon epidemiologists and others who are using statistical data to help us make decisions and guide our practice for dealing with the crisis. So I could talk at length, but I won't. I would refer you to two of the pull quotes in the document. The first on page 4 that I think says a lot about our vision. UNC-Chapel Hill aims to lead by shaping the emerging field of data science through an interdisciplinary and human-centric approach to the entire data lifecycle. So people across the campus have all applied data. We have to work with everybody, whether it be in the health affairs areas, and in environmental areas, and issues of social and political justice. All of these fields, the humanities, the social sciences, as well as the physical sciences, have data issues, and all of them have to be at the table. The second quote that I think is extremely important is on page 12, and this I think brings us to something that we certainly will be depending upon your leadership to help with. And it says, it is critical to ensure that this recommendation is grounded in the implementable and sustainable financial plan. So we're not going to do this unless we can actually do it in the Carolina way that makes this eventual school be one of those top schools we're also proud of. So I think I'd like to stop there and open it up for questions. And thank you for your attention and to this important emerging issue.
Very good. Let me ask you any questions. But first of all, let me say, again, whereas the Chancellor and the team are working on the crisis, he and the team and others are working on the future at the same time. This is a great example of that, where we can be a true leader internationally in this field. So we open it up for questions, comments from members of the board.
Mr. Chairman, this is John Pryor. I'd just like to ask, how did the past few weeks and what we've been dealing with and the obvious financial constraints affect the planning of what might otherwise be a great idea, but obviously there are some newfound constraints on the funding, I'm assuming?
Yes, I'll try to answer that, John. Thank you for that question. There's no question that this new project would require new resources. We had envisioned that these new resources would come from a number of different areas. Not one source would be likely to support this entire project. We envisioned enrollment dollars and tuition dollars being a part of it. We envisioned that there would be donations, part of an endowment that perhaps would be a part of it, as well as state appropriations. And so, I do agree that this financial crisis that is upon us as a result of the coronavirus situation that we're all facing is likely to have a short-term impact and perhaps even a long-term impact. We're still in the planning stages, and so we expect that it will take us another 6 months, 9 months to lay out a very thorough, comprehensive plan that would position us for the long term. And so this is a long-term play that we feel is necessary for the university to at least consider. And we do feel that over time we will be able to hopefully garner the necessary resources to support this. But to your question, there's no doubt that we will have to be very careful in terms of how we proceed and make sure that at every step of the way that we're considering not only the financial needs of a program like that, but the financial realities of the state and the university to support it.
Other questions, comments?
Question.
Kelly?
It was my understanding when this started to develop that we actually do a lot of this already on campus, and it had never consolidated into a school. Is it possible that there's actually some, not savings, but some consolidation that could take place to centralize some of our research that we're already doing?
Yes, and actually the proposal recognizes that. So Kelly, thank you very much for that question. And the fact is that there is very extensive activity around data science already taking place within the university. And we believe that it is that very essence of that breadth of work that's already taking place that can enable us to do something truly distinctive. And that there are some cost-saving strategies already embedded in this proposal. So in it, we are proposing that we take some existing units, the School of Information and Library Sciences, the departments of Computer Science and STORE, as well as other departments and schools that have broad interest in data science. So there will be inherent in this proposal a tremendous amount of efficiencies and savings as a consequence of taking full advantage of the resources that we currently have. Now, if this were not feasible moving forward, could we still mount a serious effort in data science? Absolutely. And we could do that in a number of ways, and we could take from many of the things that we've already learned in the creation of this proposal in order to strengthen and further consolidate a number of activities that are taking place across the campus. So yes, I think we can do that, but it would not have the same kind of national and international impact that the pursuit of a proposal that we've put in front of you would have.
If I could just add to that, Bob, I think you're spot on, and I think that we have an opportunity here to eliminate some of the redundancies that we have learned exist on our campus with regard to instruction. I think that it's going to help with, instead of having 6 researchers on our campus competing for the same research dollars, where there's an RFP out there that intersects with data science, I think they're going to be working together as a team, and it's going to better position UNC-Chapel Hill to win those research grants and those awards. And so I think it's going to, it's really going to help to, that consolidation I think will be helpful in addition to just reallocating some of the existing resources. So I think, John, you've asked a really important question, but we have to pay attention to the budgetary issues that we're going to be facing. So I'm excited about the initiative. Kelly, looks like you had a follow-up, sorry.
No follow-up, just thank you.
Other questions, comments from members of the board? Again, I would tell you that it's my observation that organizations, whether it be companies or institutions or universities, whatever, who during times of crisis plan for the next step when the crisis is over, are the ones that are the most successful. And this is another example of what's happening now for our campus. They're looking ahead, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next month, maybe not 6 months, but being ready to come out of the box quickly and be that leader that we've always been. It's a good example of that. Bobby's
Chairman,
yes.
This is John Pryor again. I readily agree with what you just said. And my only concern, and the reason I asked the question, is that in light of what is likely going to be a very, very different financial world going forward, that we not jeopardize something that might be a great idea by appearing to be tone deaf to the new reality. And that's why I asked the question, and I appreciate the discussion.
Good, it's a good question, and thank you for the discussion. Bob used the word endorse. I think we're not looking for a vote today. They're going to continue to work. At the appropriate time, come back for a vote or consideration by the board for the creation of a school. I think Bob and the team wanted, and Chancellor, discussion today, feedback today, sort of a consensus is, do we believe this is the right thing to be done, rather than a formal vote? Is that what I'm hearing, Bob and Chancellor?
Yes, and with the instruction that we would move forward with a more advanced committee looking at a full-blown proposal for the board to consider at some point in the future.
Let me ask it this way. Is there anyone who has an objection to that, or anyone who has any thoughts about that? So I think we have consensus. We're going to move ahead and at the appropriate time, come back, take into consideration all of the times we're in, financial and otherwise. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
What you've done so far. It's exciting. Chancellor, let me call on you again for the next item.
Okay, great. So as Chair Stevens mentioned in his earlier comments, we're going to hear from Professors Jim Lalutis and Pat Parker, our co-chairs of the Commission on History, Race, and Way Forward. So just a little background, and you've heard me talk about this important commission and the important work they're going to conduct at 2 previous trustee meetings. And I charged the commission last month to focus on 3 main areas to better understand our past and to learn from that past. The first being research and curation, the second, curriculum development and teaching, and the third, an engagement with underrepresented communities here in North Carolina. I said at that time that this will be some of the most important work that we'll conduct on our campus over the next 2 to 3 years, and I want to emphasize that I feel that the same way today as I did when we charged the committee. Also in February, as you know, we had members of the Carolina faculty that sent a petition to me and to the board asking that the moratorium on renaming of historical properties be reconsidered. Chair Stevens and I met with the co-chairs of the commission several weeks ago and reaffirmed, just as Richard did earlier, that the commission's work will be conducted without limitations. They're free to carry out this work without boundaries, and that recommendations regarding renaming of historical campus properties and buildings may ultimately be included in the commission's work and may eventually become part of the recommendations moving forward. I've spoken with many people on our campus over the past 12 months, including faculty, students, staff, former and current Board of Trustees members, and I think everybody agrees that the work of this commission is imperative to our forward progress as a university. And so it's now my pleasure to introduce our Commission on History, Race, and the Way Forward co-chairs, Pat Parker, who is the Associate Professor and Chair of the Department of Communication, and her co-chair, Professor Jim Laludis, Professor of History, and the Peter Grauer Associate Dean for Honors Carolina. I just want to thank Jim and Pat for all of your hard work in the midst of this difficult time, and we now look forward to hearing your plans with the commission. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Chancellor Guskiewicz. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chair Stevens, also for your support. As the Chancellor said, my name is Patricia Parker. I'm Chair of the Department of Communication in the College of Arts and Sciences. I am also a founding board member and current director of the Graduate Certificate in Participatory Research, which supports community accountable collaborative research and engagement. And I'm excited about bringing these areas of expertise to my work on the commission as a co-chair of the commission.
Great. Good morning, everyone. It's good to be with you, if only virtually at the moment. I, of course, know some of you on the board and have worked with you in the past, and am really looking forward to getting to know new members of the board. So again, it's great to be here with you this morning. I'm a double Tar Heel. I got my BA here and my PhD, and have been fortunate to be back and on the faculty since 1989. And I would just, add to what Pat has said, to just underscore how privileged we feel, and also how humbled we are by the trust that the Chancellor and you as members of the board have invested in us as we embark on this really fundamentally important project for the current and future life of the university.
Thank you. And so we absolutely appreciate this opportunity to join on behalf of the join the board on behalf of the Commission on Race, History, and the Way Forward. And so we'll have just a brief presentation, and I would ask the board members to reference their handout. You should have received a handout for today's presentation. Maybe let TJ know if you didn't get that. So we'll be following along with that, and then we're happy to save time for questions. So I'd like to begin by just reiterating briefly the charge, and we're grateful to Chancellor Guskiewicz for his leadership in establishing the commission at this critical time. Universities around the world are being called to provide a guiding light as we as a society begin to think about the legacies of race and inequities within our institutions. And so the Chancellor's charge provides clear direction along those lines to explore, engage, and teach the university's history with race, and provide recommendations to the Chancellor on how we as a university community can reckon with the past in order to move forward.
Well, as you see on the handout and from Chancellor Guskiewicz's charge, there are three main focus areas for our work. The first is research and curation. And our task here is to undertake a systematic scholarly investigation of the university's historical relationship to slavery, and also to the dispossession of indigenous peoples here in central North Carolina and in the mountain region of western North Carolina and East Tennessee, where those lands came into the possession of the university and financed the institution through much of its early history. Our campus, of course, bears traces of that history, but they are, for the most part, hidden and silenced. So our task is to sort of break through that silence and provide access to a history, to an understanding of the past that can help us move forward together. I would just say here that I think it's really important to keep in mind that history as a discipline, as a scholarly venture, it's not just about chronicling the past. History also has, I think, a great clarifying power. It can help us discern better the present, and I think most especially its value is in helping us imagine or perhaps reimagine what the future might be. Now, as we're doing this research, we're also going to be thinking about curriculum in teaching, because we want to embed our work in the teaching mission of the university. And we'll do that in part by drawing students into the work, graduate students and undergraduate students alike, so that it becomes part of their development as scholars. And we also want to find ways to make our discoveries, to make this enterprise part of the permanent curriculum of the university, so that this work, it outlasts us and will carry on long after the commission's tenure has come to an end.
And then, of course, the third area that the Chancellor mentioned that's a part of our work is engagement, ethics, and reckoning. And we understand that as really central to our work in terms of a concern for community engagement, understanding what people think is important through having listening sessions and public forums. And we expect our work to be guided by this collaborative effort in terms of thinking about what the processes are that we use to investigate our work, and also in incorporating some of the community concerns in terms of thinking about our work. So now, along those lines, I'd like to transition to thinking about the guiding principles. We have had two commission meetings. In a moment, we're going to talk about the wonderful commissioners that are helping us with the work, that are doing the work. But at our first commission meeting back in February, we settled on 5 guiding principles. The first 2 are interrelated: openness and transparency. We expect to make our work open, accessible, by sharing information and being open to feedback. We know that we may not always get things right, and we're committed to acknowledging whatever missteps may come along and then making things right. And related to that is transparency. We're committed to being transparent about our key processes and our decision making. And again, being accountable to the people to whom this work is going to have so much impact and meaning.
The third principle is collaboration. And we understand at the outset that a project of this sort is by its very nature the work of many hands. There are others on campus who have projects underway. I think especially the Institute for African American Research and the Center for the Study of the American South, projects underway that overlap with ours in very exciting ways. And we understand part of our responsibility to be to engage these other initiatives and to lift them up together along with the Commission's work, so that people in our community have a chance really to see this enterprise in its totality. The fourth principle is accountability. Pat and I, members of the Commission, have taken up this work with a conviction that I know you, as members of the Board of Trustees, share. A conviction that it must, at the end of the day, make a measurable and meaningful difference in the life of our campus and in the life of our community as we think about it expanding outward from the campus to Chapel Hill and Carborough, the state, the region, the nation, and in fact, the world. There are many eyes watching what we're doing and looking to us for leadership. And this is really what we mean when we talk about sort of reckoning with our history. You know, the central question is, how do we use an understanding of the past to help us, to guide us in shaping a community on this campus and beyond that is genuinely inclusive, a community in which all feel welcome and respected and feel a real stake of ownership. We are convinced that at the end of the day, as I say, that's what it means to be true to ourselves as the university of the people. And then finally, courage. And this probably should be at the top of the list because in some ways, this is most important of all. The courage to have difficult conversations, the courage to answer hard questions truthfully, and the courage to commit ourselves as individuals and as an institution to change. Because without that kind of courage, there really is no way forward. You have on the handout a list of the commission members. I think we'll not go through those one by one, but as you scan them and later on have a chance to study them, I think you can sort of see one of the things about this project that excites Pat and me the most, and that is the extraordinary group of colleagues who've stepped up, accepted the invitation to join this work. It is a quite remarkable range of scholarly expertise and brought to bear on the commission's work.
And we're also very excited that 3 student members will also be joining the commission, and we're hoping that we'll have those students identified and ready to go to work prior to our May meeting, which we're hoping will go forward given the current crisis that's happening with the global pandemic. So now we'd love to hear from you if you have any questions or comments. And again, thank you very much for having us join you at your meeting. So let us know if you have questions or comments.
Thank you, Professor Sparker and Lalutis, for questions, comments from members of the board.
Mr. Chair, this is Chuck, if I may.
Yes, please.
First of all, to Pat and Jim, I've gotten to know Pat via the Chancellor Search Committee. I've known of her before that time, but what a wonderful person and brilliant person. And Jim has been a close friend for years. And I trust him as much as possible. I've worked with him a long time on Saunders Hall and Silent Sam, and I know what he tries to do. And it's all about facts. So I encourage everyone to support this committee. I think it's a very important job that continues what we as a board tried to begin in 2015, and there were delays and blocks for various reasons, and none of that matters because this is where we are. And I think it's a great committee that the Chancellor has done a great job of putting together. We're in good hands with them, and I'll take seriously, and hope we all will, their findings and requests and suggestions and things as we go forward, and take it seriously like we have in the past. I look forward to seeing it. I know there have been questions about the petition on the moratorium. They don't have anything, they're not tied together in my mind, but I will commit to considering carefully anything that this committee brings forward with the support of the Chancellor, and hope that we do this all together to make Carolina better and the best it can be. And that's sort of my take on the thing. Thank you for your time and effort. I do think this is important. I believe this university needs to run to these issues. I believe that for a long time, and I think I've stuck my neck out on a couple occasions because I truly believe it. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Duckett.
Thank you, Chuck.
Others on the board, comments, questions?
Yeah, Richard, this is Jeff. I applaud, I mean, I echo Chuck's comments, and both from the standpoint of the leadership that Jim and Pat will bring to this, and Kevin's work as well. and a lot of the guiding principles and things of that nature that are spelled out in the commission charge that Kevin gave. I did have a couple of comments that I guess in the spirit of openness and making sure that we all feel confident of just expressing both the optimism that Chuck expressed, but also maybe a couple of cautionary notes, if I may. I mean, the one I do with the little history of the 2015, I think the world has changed since 2015 when our resolution occurred. At the same time, our resolution did focus on the learning and the educating and the curating. And I appreciated Jim's comments here and Pat's as well when you talk about reckoning. But the phrase reckoning and reckoning with is maybe bears a little bit of exploring as we go forward with this. And that I think it can have differing interpretations. I like what you said, Jim, which was reckoning. I think you were describing it in the context of moving forward to an inclusive community and shaping the community positively. Reckoning can be to take into consideration, which we're doing. We're taking race and our history in consideration, but it also can often mean to settle accounts. And so somewhere in between, I believe, is where I think the commission's and Kevin's charge lands. But maybe after I finish my remarks, I might want Jim or Pat, Kevin to elaborate a little bit on that, because there are the different ways we can look at this. And I want, through the openness, I hope all voices can be heard on this. And I know that's your intention. I will say in the sensitive subject of race, though, in history, there can be a tendency where certain voices don't feel fully comfortable being at the table. So thank you for your recognition of the importance of ensuring that all voices are at the table. And the final comment I would make is on the history, the nature of the history that you're discussing. The charge and the material we received references really a lot of history that goes back, as you mentioned, Jim, back to the founding of the university, into the history up through perhaps slavery, and then soon thereafter. But I really hope I think it's critically important that the history be the full history that brings us forward to today. Because if we're going to discuss where we are as a community, I think it's critically important that we are very mindful of the deep, painful past, and that some of that continues, but that we also are mindful of progress that has been made over the past decades and into the current day. And that's going to provide for a context upon which the conversations and the reckoning that shapes the inclusive community is going to be best advanced. So those are my overview comments. And I'd be happy, again, to get a little more flavor on, I think you've described it, Jim, but the cautionary notes on what we're looking at when we start talking about the reckoning. All of this I embrace fully. Please don't take my comments as negative, but rather this can be tricky work, and I just hope we can do it in a way that includes all voices and that the full history is heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Jim, you want to respond, or Pat want to respond, or Chancellor for that?
Jimmy, just I'll let Pat come in here too. Jeff, I appreciate that question. And what I'm about to say is not about dodging that question, but I think acknowledging how profoundly important it is. You're the core, they are posing a question that, not just we as a university, but we as a nation have not really had a forthright discussion of the kind of question you're raising. And so that is going to be a fundamental part of everything we do. And again, I'd come back to the makeup of this committee. A lot of thought went into the selection of colleagues to serve on the committee, people who could bring the scholarly expertise to bear to help us think through this question you're posing in a considered and substantive way. So I hope that doesn't feel like dodging your question, but I do think in some ways you're right at the heart of the work and the challenge we have in front of us.
And Jim, I would just add that I agree with what you're saying. And as a communication scholar, of course, I'm always interested in how we can have accountable conversations. That's where our principles of accountability come in, right? In terms of making sure that all voices are at the table and that we have a conversation that is accountable to those voices and accountable to our commitment to, you know, what this commission is all about, right? Creating a more inclusive, equitable university. So I guess I would just remind you that you said that you trust us, and we trust you to bring those hard questions to us, and we'll have a process that brings us to that, you know, a deliberative process that we all can you know, tap into.
This is Teresa Artis Neal, and I have this unbelievable respect for both Pat and for Jim, for all that you do, and I'm so excited about this work. I also do echo what Jeff has said, and you're right on point when you reference the notion of having accountable conversations. To the extent that I don't know people who are members of the commission, I do trust you all that to the extent that we have scholars on campus which represent all views, and this is going back to what Jeff just said, making sure all voices are heard, I know that you will find a way to bring those views that may not be represented into the conversation. I'm not suggesting they aren't there, I just don't know all the members of the commission. Because I think for what our work, in order for our work to be successful and received, we've got to have people believe all voices could be heard. I do think that's so critical. And in the back of my mind, I wonder if it does not at some point involve some of the work I hope comes out of the civil discourse conversation of just people being able to have these accountable conversations that are just very, very frank. So I'm excited about the work, and I look forward to what happens in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
I may?
Yep. Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
David Bullock here. Just a question, and Pat, hello, hope you're doing well.
Hello, Jeff.
Got to know Pat during the Chancellor Search Committee meetings. I don't know Jim, but have a lot of respect for his work. Question I have is, has there been any discussion of what an end product from the commission will look like, and what type of information and what form, sort of where the rubber meets the road, will that information take?
That's a great question. We have several, well, let me say that at our second commission meeting, we divided our commission into 3 subgroups. And so we already have 3 subgroups that are 3 subcommittees that are working on each of the 3 areas that we outlined. And so I don't want to overstep their work because they are going to focus in on some of the areas, something that we've been calling sort of the, I don't know, the low-hanging fruit, right? Things that we can tap into right away. And so at the risk of sort of overstepping that, Jim, do you think there are things that we can mention that our subcommittees are working on at this point? We hadn't really thought about that.
Yeah, sure.
We're going to share. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to share?
Yeah, it's, I mean, this is a great question, one we're working through as well. I mean, there are a number of things that are a priority for us at the moment. You know, the History Task Force had been working on the curation of McCorkle Place, and particularly addressing the Unsung Founders Memorial, which I'm sure for those of you who walk regularly through that quad know has been kind of slowly sinking into the ground. So one project that the task force had underway and that we'd have an opportunity to pick up is to work on that memorial and think about, you know, as we do work to sort of rehabilitate that space, also take the opportunity to see what we could do by way of creating a space that's more reflective and contemplative and really invites people to sit and learn about and reflect on the history of the university. Out of the archives, one significant project has been simply making a roster of the names of enslaved people we're able to identify in the records of the university, people whose labor was hired from their owners to work in the university, craftsmen and laborers who were involved in building the university. An opportunity to share those names when we think about, what names are on the landscape. And it seems so important, especially in this context, because we're dealing with people caught in an institution that fundamentally denied their humanity and it did its best to erase that humanity. There's great power, we think, in speaking people's names. Long term, there will be scholarship that will come out of this. I think there will be scholarship that's written mostly for other scholars, scholarships that are more important, written for a general audience. We can think about ways that this history becomes part of the orientation of new students and staff and faculty. We will have a big digital presence because there are powerful ways they are not only to share the end product, but to share the materials on which our account of the history is based. So we invite members of the community to come in and themselves be historians and explore the archives, explore the history of the institution, and think about what that means in the way that they go about their daily lives and their scholarship. Pat, you may want to add more there, whether I kind of covered the basis or.
Yes, and in addition to that, I would just add that we are working on convening some forums to have this opportunity for relevant aspects of our communities to have the opportunities for dialogue, reflection, and reaction to the university's historic relationship to race. I mean, again, part of our focus is on community engagement and being accountable to those communities. So having those forums, we may have listening sessions as well that will, if we can ever get ourselves out of social distancing, we hope to be able to go around the state and hear from folks and other aspects of our community.
And the one other thing we should add is Pat and I were just at the meeting of an organization called Universities Studying Slavery. It's centered at UVA, but what's interesting, if you read the genesis story of that consortium, they reference us in 2002 with a 2002 class gift of the Unsung Founders Memorial and its dedication in 2005 as one of the places the work began. So, we need to catch up. We've been a little behind the curve for a while. But we have about what, Pat, I think 50 some institutions now across the United States and an increasing number of institutions worldwide who are joining the consortium. Our plan is we have our name penciled in on the calendar to host that group in 2022.
Right.
So it will be really a wonderful opportunity to bring people to Chapel Hill from all over the country and from all over the world to learn about the work we're doing and what it might mean for them back in their institutions.
Other questions, comments?
I have a comment.
Yes, Kelly.
I just want to thank Jim and Patricia for leading this, co-chairing this. And I think you're hearing from all of the board members that have been here for a bit longer. So I want to focus on the accountability and the courage. I think that's where, before I roll off, to know that we have something started from an accountability perspective of what will this look like going forward? How can I set my expectations? Where are we with that? And it's something that is going to take courage, because that is where I think we have historically backed down. And so I think if I could put in a request or a hope, that is to have something before the end of the year that can steer us forward through this with some accountability.
I think yes, absolutely. We're very aware, and as are all the members of the commission, that this is not something, where we can say, well, we were appointed for 3 years. We'll check in, 24 or 36 months from now and let you know what we found. I think it's going to be one of the challenges. It's going to be important that not only we share the information at the end of the next year, but that we find ways to, as we go along, share the work we're doing. So there's an opportunity for the community to learn along with us. But I think we hear that sense of urgency loud and clear.
Absolutely. And Jim and I have had an opportunity to make presentations as we're doing here with a number of groups. We made a presentation to the faculty council, to the employee forum, and also the student executive board advisory to the chancellor. And each of those forums, I mean, Kelly, they echo what you're asking. They're asking for that accountability. How is this going to be different? And we are hearing that, and we are, as a commission, responding to that, and intend to share our work and let you, sort of share some of those milestones, I want to say, that we will set for ourselves, and to be forthright in sharing that. So thank you very much for that question.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments?
Looks like Amy's unmuted. Do you want to?
Thank you. I just wanted to echo, well, first of all, thank Jim and Pat for picking up this important work going forward with where the history task force stopped, but left, I think, some good seeds and nuggets for this group to follow. And so I'm really looking forward to and happy to be working with this group going forward. I want to echo just a couple of things. One thing that Jim mentioned, that the history, looking at the history is critically important to understanding where we've been. But with Carolina Next, that's just come online, with planning for the future of this great institution, I believe that this work is ever more important to plan where we're going in the future. And so I'm really excited to be part of not just Carolina Next, but the commission as we chart our path forward, learning from where we've been, understanding where we are, and planning where we want to go. And I think that underlines so much of the work in Carolina Next. I'd also like to just acknowledge that at each of the commission meetings, Jim and Pat have set aside a public comment forum, an opportunity for the public to come into those meetings and have some time to share, to hold us all accountable, to hear their thoughts, their concerns, to offer opportunity for public debate as necessary. And so that is an element of each of the meetings. And I think that's a critically important element that not only addresses Chair Hopkins' comments and remarks, but also, Trustee Hopkins, but also Trustee Artis and also Trustee Brown as well. So again, I want to just echo and thank them for their leadership and leading the commission, the Chancellor for organizing this incredible group of folks, and look forward to planning with them all the future for Carolina.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you all for discussion, and thank you for your leadership. We got the best of the best doing this. This is critically important work, and we're just glad we've got terrific people running it and managing it. And so we look forward to our continued dialogue with you. Again, please work unfettered and bring us back your best advice and recommendations. Any other questions about this? If not, I'd like to move the agenda on.
Hey, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
John Pryor here. Just recognizing that the bulk of this took place before I went on the board, and I understand the importance of the work. I heard the Chancellor say this is one of his most important priorities for the next 2 to 3 years. And in light of that, I just would like to, again, caution everyone that we're headed into what are likely very different financial times. And my concern is that the university not appear to be tone deaf or even have a blind spot on some of those things that would make the projects like this that are important to everyone less viable going forward. So I hope that everybody's aware of that, and just wanted to say that I understand why everyone wants to continue as if nothing is different today, but the financial realities and how money is spent, I think, are going to be very different going forward.
John, if I can just, I appreciate the comment, and we're looking at this every day. We're talking about the financial situation with COVID-19. I will say that right out of the gate, when we announced this Build Our Community Together Fund, as Amy said, it is our first strategic initiative in Carolina Next. But right out of the gate, we had a number of private gifts that will help to support this. UNC Healthcare, the Keenan Trust jumped in, the Arts and Sciences Foundation, Institute for Arts and Humanities, and others. So several alumni as well. So we're going to rely a lot on private giving for this. People are passionate about it. I'm not suggesting that we won't need some university funding as we think about the curriculum, et cetera. But your comments are appreciated.
Thank you, Chancellor. Thank you, John.
Richard,
Okay. Yes.
And it seems like I often come in at the end, and it's not because I want any to extend the conversation or make it any more impactful because it's at the end. It's simply I'm trying to be respectful that other people ask questions. Excellent questions. In fact, Kelly's asked the question, kind of what I wanted to ask about. In a way, what the timeline is of the commission. I've heard words urgency and things of that nature. We're looking at history. We got all the time in the world to do that, but the petition, the issue that going forward with respect to the renaming of buildings and such, I don't think we have as much time to deal with that as we do the others, some of the others. I guess my question is, are y'all taking that into account as far as your timeline? We don't want anything urgent. We want you to take time to consider whatever you're considering. But I guess my question is that being considered at the forefront, number one? Number two, at least I would like your input on whatever criteria we're going to be using going forward with respect to those issues that are now subject to the moratorium. And I assume that you're looking at those kind of issues because somebody with courage and knowledge needs to, make suggestions to those who are ultimately going to make the decision as to what that criteria should be.
Yeah, yes, thank you for that. It is at the top of our list. Both sort of trying to figure out on the front end the principles we think should guide us as an institution that are true to who we are, and beginning to take some, it'll require some new scholarship, but the scholarship we have to hand to help us think our way through this question. I think you're right. The questions of memorialization of the landscape, there is urgency to them, and I think we would be perhaps a bit naive to imagine that they somehow are just going to go away. So yes, I mean, it's a priority for us to try to develop some guidance there, some sense of a way forward on those issues.
Well, this has been a really good discussion. And again, thank you for all you're doing. We'll look forward to our continuing dialogue. And thank you again for being here today.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Those watching our board who don't normally do that, we're now going to entertain a motion to go into what's known as closed session, where we'll discuss various legal and personnel matters. And following that, we'll come back into open session, possibly for action in some personnel areas, but that's all I anticipate action on following our closed session. So with that, I'd like to call on Secretary Teresa Ortiz Neal for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board convene in closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute Section 143-318.11, subsection A, subsection 1, to prevent the disclosure of privileged information under Section 126-22, and also pursuant to Section 143-318.11, subsections A, subsection 2, subsection A3, subsection 5, subsection A6, 7, and 9.
You heard the motion. Is there a second?
Gene Davis seconds.
Second. Further discussion? Not all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, no. We will go in closed session. We need just a few minutes to clear the virtual room. turn off the YouTube, etc. So TJ, tell us when you're ready, okay? Okay, we're now back in open session. And we have a motion coming from closed session regarding some personnel matters. Let me recognize Trustee Duckett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have two personnel EHRA items, one faculty and one non-faculty, as presented, were passed in closed session, and we bring those forward for approval by the board.
You've heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Haywood. Further discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Motion's adopted. Is there further business to come before the board? Again, I want to thank everyone for participating in our first, I hope our last virtual meeting. But stay tuned. You all have been very patient. I appreciate your flexibility and understanding, and those who normally would be at our meetings. I'm sorry you can't be with us personally, but I know you understand the times we're in. Chancellor, again, to you and your team, thank you for your leadership and what you're doing.
Got a great team, and I want to thank all of you for your support. I've heard from many of you over the past few weeks, just checking in, and it means a lot. And we'll continue to keep this incredible place moving forward. As I said, as I look out over the old well, it's kind of sad. There are some workers out there. The tulips are up, and it looks awesome. But we'll get you all back here soon, and stay safe.
Thank you. No further business to come before the board. I'll entertain a motion from Gene Davis to adjourn.
Yes, Chairman, make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Haywood. Further discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes definitely have it, and we stand adjourned. Again, thanks, everyone.
Best wishes, everyone. Stay safe.
Stay safe, people. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.